Welcome to episode 24 of the Ulysses Unlocked podcast, where we are summarizing the Proteus episode of Ulysses by James Joyce. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment to support us.
And welcome back. We are jumping right into the deep end today. We're looking at Chapter 3 of Ulysses, the Proteus Deep Dive.
And for so many readers, this is really the moment where the book either clicks or it throws you off completely.
It's a wall.
It is. I mean, if you got through Telemachus and Nestor, you might be feeling pretty good, and then you hit this chapter and it feels like you've just been, well, washed out to sea.
Yeah. All the familiar structures, the dialogue, it kind of falls away. You are plunged directly into Stephen Dedalus's mind, completely unfiltered.
And he's alone walking on Sandymount Strand, and we are just stuck in there with him.
It is incredibly dense. It's just this constant stream of allusions to, classical philosophy, German mystics, things he picked up in Paris. It's relentless.
And that can be really intimidating. So we want to say this right at the top. If you are struggling with this chapter, you are absolutely not alone. It's probably one of the most famously difficult parts of the whole novel.
Oh, for sure.
But, and this is the crucial thing, please do not give up. The whole chapter is this incredible meditation on reality, on perception, on what it means to be an artist. And if you can get a handle on the core themes, which is what we're here to do, it is so rewarding.
It really is. This chapter is almost a key to understanding why Joyce writes the way he does. And the sources we're looking at, all the scholarly notes and commentaries, they all point us to the mythological core.
The anchor for the whole thing, Proteus.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's set that up. Who is Proteus, and why on earth is he the namesake for Stephen's walk on the beach?
Well, in the mythology, in Homer, the Proteus is this ancient sea god. They call him the Old Man of the Sea. And his defining trait is that he's a prophet. He knows everything.
But he doesn't want to tell you.
He does not want to tell you. He's very, very reluctant. So to get a prophecy out of him, you literally had to wrestle him, pin him down.
And while you're holding on, he's changing shape.
Constantly. He'd turn into a lion, a snake, fire, water, a tree. Anything he could think of to make you let go. Only if you held on through all those changes would he give up and tell you the truth.
That sounds a lot like trying to pin down a single thought in Stephen's head.
It's the perfect metaphor. Joyce himself said it. He said, change is the theme. Everything changes. Sea, sky, man, animals. The words change, too.
So the shape-shifting isn't just a theme, it's the actual style. The prose itself keeps changing form, just like Proteus. Stephen is trying to pin down reality, but reality itself and the language he's using to do it just won't stay still.
And that struggle begins on the very first line. I mean, what an opening. It's probably one of the most famous and, let's be honest, intimidating lines in modern literature.
Oh, absolutely. The gauntlet is thrown down immediately. Ineluctable modality of the visible. At least that, if no more, thought through my eyes.
It just stops you in your tracks. It feels like you've walked into a philosophy lecture already in progress.
So we have to break that down piece by piece, because that sentence really is the key to the whole chapter.
It is. It's the thesis statement.
Okay, let's start with ineluctable. The simple definition is just inescapable, right? Unavoidable.
Right. But that kind of misses the texture of the word. The real juice is in the Latin root, iluctare.
Which means?
It means to struggle out of. So when you add the in prefix, it doesn't just mean unavoidable. It means something you are unavoidably struggling to escape from. There's a fight implied in the word itself.
Oh, that's brilliant. So Stephen isn't just passively accepting what he sees. He feels trapped by it. He's fighting to get out of it, but knows he can't.
Exactly. And the thing he's trapped in is the modality, which is just the way he perceives things, the form of perception, in this case, sight.
So, the ineluctable modality of the visible is the inescapable, frustrating prison of having to see the world through your own subjective eyes.
You've got it. We can never get to pure objective reality. It's always filtered through us. And this connects right back to the last chapter, Nestor, where he was trying to think away history. He's still on that same quest.
But he gives himself a little bit of an out, doesn't he? At least that, if no more.
Yeah, that's his compromise. It's like, okay, my perception is flawed, it's subjective, but it's a starting point. It's something real to hang on to. It's his version of Descartes' I think, therefore I am. For Stephen, it's I see, therefore I am. For now.
So once he's established that shaky foundation, he immediately launches this massive philosophical battle in his head right there on the sand.
He does. He's trying to reconcile two of the biggest, most opposed traditions in Western thought, empiricism versus idealism.
And he starts with Aristotle, the ultimate materialist. But he gives him this very strange description.
He does. bald he was, and a millionaire. Maestro di color sanno.
Which is such a weird mix of things. What's that all about?
Well, the Italian part, Maestro di color sanno, that's pure reverence. Means the master of those who know. It's a direct quote from Dante's Inferno, where Aristotle is given the place of highest honor in limbo.
So that's the serious part. What about the bald millionaire bit?
That's Stephen's slightly weird scavenged knowledge. Those are details from these old kind of apocryphal medieval biographies of Aristotle. So it shows his knowledge is both deep and a little eccentric.
And he's testing Aristotle's core idea, right? The idea that the physical world comes first.
Exactly. For Aristotle, the empiricist, you need the physical thing before you can perceive it. He talks about color, for example, and says it needs diaphanousness or transparency to exist in bodies. The body has to be there first.
And Stephen follows that logic in his head. He thinks, but he adds in bodies. Then he was aware of them bodies before of them colored.
It's this brilliant little shorthand for the whole empirical argument. And then Stephen asks the big question. How did Aristotle know the bodies were there before he saw them?
And the answer is just perfect, pure Dublin common sense.
It is. How? But knocking his sconce against them, sure.
You can't get more material than that. It's high philosophy crashing into just bumping your head on something.
And it immediately makes you think of that other famous story from philosophy, right?
Dr. Samuel Johnson.
Dr. Johnson. He had absolutely no time for idealism, this idea that things only exist if we perceive them. And when someone challenged him to refute Bishop Berkeley's philosophy,
he just walked over to a big stone, kicked it as hard as he could, and said, I refute it thus.
Exactly. So Stephen's mind is fusing Aristotle with Dr. Johnson. The argument is the same. The physical world pushes back. You can't just wish it away.
But he's not satisfied with that. He has to give the other side its due.
He does. Now he has to tackle idealism. And the main champion of that for him is the Anglo-Irish philosopher George Berkeley.
And Berkeley's philosophy is the very thing Stephen is trying to struggle out of, that ineluctable condition.
It is. For Berkeley, there are no independently existing physical objects. They're all just, in his words, colored signs in our minds, put there by God.
So the world isn't a collection of things, it's a language, a text.
A text. Berkeley literally called it the language of the author of nature. The whole world is a screen with divine symbols on it that we are meant to read, not just experience physically.
Which is a very appealing idea for an aspiring artist like Stephen.
Oh, absolutely. And it connects directly to another one of his intellectual obsessions. He thinks, signatures of all things, I am here to read.
Okay, that's another big leap. Where's that from?
That's from a 17th century German mystic named Jakob Böhme. He wrote a book called On the Signatures of Things.
Signatures of Things?
Yeah, Böhme's idea was that God signed all of creation, that the outer physical form of a plant or a rock or anything was a visible clue to its inner spiritual reality.
So when Stephen looks at the beach, he's not just seeing seaweed and trash.
No, he's trying to be the person who can read the divine code. He's looking at sea spawn and sea wrack, the nearing tide, that rusty boot, and seeing them as colored signs. He's trying to be a prophet.
And then he gives that amazing list of colors. Snot green, blue silver, rust.
Classic Stephen. He pairs this incredibly sublime, mystical quest with the ugliest, most visceral descriptions imaginable. It keeps him grounded.
So he has these two opposing ideas in his head. The world is solid matter, or the world is just a projection. And he decides he has to test it.
The only way to test it. He has to take away the primary sense, the modality of the visible. So he closes his eyes.
Shut your eyes and see.
He does. He closes his eyes and just starts walking, listening to his boots on the beach, crushing the crackling wrack and shells. And the whole focus of the chapter shifts from sight to sound.
Right, and this is where he introduces those two German words that can really throw you off. Nacheinander and Nebeneinander.
Yes. He thinks of the sounds of his footsteps as the Nacheinander, and later worries about falling through the Nebeneinander.
Okay, let's break them down. Nacheinander is after one another.
Right. It's associated with time, a sequence of events, one after the other, like music or the sound of his footsteps, the ineluctable modality of the audible.
And Nebeneinander is next to one another.
Which is space. Objects arranged side by side, which you perceive all at once with your eyes, like a painting or the stuff scattered on the beach.
Now, for years, the scholarship said Joyce got these terms from the German writer Lessing, who used them to talk about art.
That was the standard assumption, yeah.
Yeah.
Lessing used them to separate temporal arts, like poetry, from spatial arts, like sculpture.
But this is where the deeper research pays off, because that's not where Joyce got them from.
No, it turns out he was reading this really controversial Austrian writer, Otto Weininger, A pretty nasty guy, actually. But Joyce found this idea in his book on the ultimate things, and Joyce copied it down.
What was Weininger's point?
The difference is subtle, but really important. For Weininger, and so for Stephen, these terms aren't about different types of art, they're about perception itself. He realizes that space and time aren't separate categories. They're tangled up together.
And Stephen has that amazing line where he thinks of himself walking a very short space of time through very short times of space.
He's merging them. He's experiencing times spatially and space temporally. It's a total synthesis of his senses.
And all this is happening while he's blindfolded, walking along the beach, asking himself the biggest question of all. Is any of this still here if I'm not looking at it?
That's the core of the experiment.
Yeah.
He's pushing Berkeley's idealism to its absolute limit.
And then he can't take it anymore.
He stops. He asks, has all vanished since? If I open and am forever in the black Diaphane, basta.
Basta, Italian for enough. He's done. He has to know.
So he opens his eyes. And the world is still there.
Yeah.
Everything. The shells, the tide, all of it.
And his conclusion is just definitive. See now, they're all the time without you, and ever shall be, world without end.
That phrase, world without end, is just so powerful. It's taken directly from the Christian prayer, the Gloria Patri.
But he's not using it for God. He's applying it to the physical, material world.
He is. He's hijacking the language of religion for philosophy. He's saying the material world is the thing that is eternal. It lines up perfectly with Aristotle's idea of eternally existing matter.
So he's rejecting the Christian idea of creation out of nothing.
Absolutely. For Stephen, in this moment, matter is eternal. It always was and always will be. And that idea is what the Joyce scholars call the sense of this chapter. Prima materia, first matter, the indestructible stuff of the universe.
The stuff of Proteus.
Exactly.
So now that he's established that the world is real and solid, he starts thinking about who, or what, built it. He hears his boots crushing the shells and thinks it's the sound of creation.
Yes, the sound is made by the mallet of Los Demiurgos.
Okay, another compound reference to unpack. Demiurgos first.
That's a Greek term. It means craftsman or architect. For Plato, the demiurge was this benevolent being who shaped the universe from pre-existing matter. Later on, some Gnostics saw the demiurge as a more sinister figure, kind of demon who trapped our spirits in the material world.
But given Stephen's conclusion that the material world is eternal and good, he seems to be leaning more towards Plato's version.
I think so, and he pairs it with loss, which is a direct nod to the poet William Blake.
One of Joyce's great heroes.
Absolutely. Loss is a central figure in Blake's mythology. He's a creator, a divine blacksmith, constantly hammering the universe into shape on his anvil.
And that hammering sound is often linked to the human heartbeat, isn't it? The sound of life being forged.
It is. Joyce knew Blake's work inside and out. There's a famous line from Blake's poem, Milton, that says, "Every space larger than a red globule of man's blood is visionary and is created by the hammer of loss."
Wow. So Stephen is seeing the very beach he's walking on as a visionary space hammered into existence. It's not a prison, it's a work of art.
Exactly. And that leads into his next huge question. Am I walking into eternity along Sandymount Strand?
Which seems like a bit of a leap.
It does, but it's another Blake reference. In that same poem, Milton, the poet, enters eternity through his foot. Blake describes binding on an immortal sandal to walk forward through eternity.
So for Stephen, the simple act of walking on a Dublin beach becomes a potential pathway to the eternal, the visionary.
Yes, and his guide on this walk is his ash plant, his walking stick. He's holding it and thinking, tap with it. I do.
The most obvious meaning there's a reference to blind people, right? Tapping their canes.
That's the first layer, for sure. And it's a great piece of foreshadowing, because later in the book, Bloom is going to have this very empathetic encounter with a blind stripling who's tapping his cane. So Stephen is kind of pre-enacting that experience.
But knowing Stephen, there has to be a deeper, more artistic meaning to the ash plant.
Of course there is. It's not just a stick. The ash plant is a symbol of the ancient Irish bards, the Fili.
They carried rods made of ash.
They did, and it symbolized their Vedic power, their prophetic vision. The bards were often said to be blind, so the rod was both a practical tool to navigate the world and a symbol of their inner sight.
So Stephen, with his ash plant, is trying on the role of the modern-day bard, the artist prophet.
He's trying to grow into that role. The stick is both for the blind man fumbling in the material world and for the prophet seeing into eternity. It's the perfect symbol for his whole struggle in this chapter.
But even as he's playing with these grand ideas, there's this constant nagging reminder of his own Well, his own alienation, and it's literally woven into the clothes he's wearing.
That is such a critical point. All this abstract thought is happening in a body that doesn't even feel like his own. He's wearing Buck Mulligan's cast-off clothes.
And he thinks about it with such detachment. My 2 feet in his boots are at the ends of his legs. He's talking about his own body as if it belongs to Mulligan.
It's radical self-alienation. He's physically dependent on the person he intellectually despises. It just grounds all his high-flying philosophy in this very grubby, dependent reality.
And he does the same thing with his own artistic ambitions. He'll have a moment of vanity and then immediately cut himself down.
He does. He imagines a future where his little writings, his epiphanies, are stored in libraries all over the world, puzzling scholars with their deeply deep meaning.
It's the ultimate fantasy for a young artist.
And then, boom, he punctures it. He quotes Hamlet to himself, mocking the whole idea. He thinks, "I, very like a whale."
Which is what Polonius says to humor Hamlet when Hamlet is just messing with him, describing a cloud.
Exactly. Stephen is saying that future readers will just be fooling me to the top of my bend. They'll be humoring his nonsense. He is his own harshest critic.
He sees himself as both Hamlet the prince and the ghost, but he's also aware he might just be talking nonsense like Polonius.
Self-doubt is always there. And then, out of all this intellectual noise, all this philosophy and self-mockery, we get one of the most raw, vulnerable moments in the entire novel.
It's complete shift in tone.
It is. It's like a whisper. He just thinks, "Touch me, soft eyes, soft hand. I am lonely here. Oh, touch me soon now. What is that word known to all men? I am quiet here alone. Sad too. Touch me."
It's just devastating. After all the talk of Aristotle and Berkeley, what he really wants is simple human contact. Touch. The one sense that's hardest to dismiss as just colored signs.
And the fact that he can't even remember that word known to all men, love, presumably, it shows how far he's drifted from common human connection. For all his genius, he is just a very sad, very lonely young man.
But he does find a connection in a strange way. Right after that moment, he leans on a rock and realizes he's made a gesture that isn't his own.
That is Kevin Egan's movement I made.
Who's Kevin Egan?
He was an old, exiled Irish nationalist Stephen knew in Paris, a kind of sad, forgotten figure. And Stephen realizes he's absorbed Egan's physical mannerisms. Even his body language is borrowed.
So it's another sign of his lack of a solid identity, but it's also a form of connection, isn't it? A shared physical vocabulary with another exile.
It's both. And that tension between his intellectual isolation and these fleeting, mundane connections is what drives the chapter. He'll go from Blake to just watching people on the beach.
And that's what happens next. He sees 2 women coming down the steps from Leahy's Terrace.
Which is such a great little detail, because that location, Leahy's Terrace, is a place Bloom will also be later that day. It's one of those invisible threads connecting them.
And Stephen's reaction to these women is pure intellectual snobbery.
Oh, completely. He uses the German word Frauenzimmer, which is pretty derogatory, like calling them wenches or something.
And he notices every detail about their working class status. The midwife's bag that she swings lordily, using the French word for heavy, and the other woman's umbrella, her gamp.
Which is a great literary joke, a reference to Mrs. Gamp from Dickens' Martin Chuzzlewit, who was this drunken, disreputable nurse who always carried an umbrella.
So his mind is immediately turning them into literary characters. He even gives one a name. This is Florence McCabe from Bride Street, and places her as coming from the Liberties.
And you have to understand what the Liberties meant in 1904 Dublin.
It wasn't about freedom.
Not at all. It was a specific area of the city, historically outside the main city walls and taxes. It was once a thriving district, but by Joyce's time, it was one of the poorest, most destitute parts of Dublin, a real slum.
So when he says they're from the Liberties, he's making a very specific note about their social class. He's putting them in a box.
He is. And his tragic artist imagination goes into overdrive. He looks at the midwife's heavy bag and imagines the most grotesque thing possible.
A misbirth with a trailing navel cord.
It's this dark, gothic vision, and it's so perfectly Stephen. But in a classic Joycean move, the book completely pulls the rug out from under that later on.
We find out what was actually in the bag.
We do. In the Wandering Rocks chapter, we learn the bag contained 11 cockles, just clams she was taking home.
So his profound, tragic vision was just completely wrong. The mundane reality of the world just refuses to conform to his artistic melodrama.
And before he gets too lost in observing them, he makes one more attempt to be the artist himself. He starts trying to write a poem as he walks.
To the rhythm of his footsteps. Crush, crack, rip.
when he comes up with the lines, "Won't you come to Sandymount, Madeline the Mare?"
Which on the surface sounds like a simple little nursery rhyme, but of course it's not.
It's a goldmine of puns. Madeline the Mare is this incredibly dense little phrase.
So what are the layers here?
Well, the first layer is probably French art. There was a famous Parisian portraitist named Madeline the Mare who was a friend of Proust. So Stephen might be wishing this sophisticated artist would come to Dublin. Or it could be Henri Le Maire, who was a sculptor who did the big relief on the front of the Madeline Church in Paris. So maybe he's wishing for a better class of public art in Sandymount.
So it's this yearning for a more sophisticated European culture to invade his provincial world.
Exactly. And then there's the final pun, the most obvious one. Mare is Latin for sea.
So Madeline the Mare is the woman, the artist, and the sea itself, all galloping along the shore, all shape-shifting.
It's Proteus in a single line of verse. And then he immediately starts critiquing his own poetry.
A catalectic tetrameter of I-ams marching. No, a gallop. Deline the Mare.
He's getting deep into the weeds of poetic meter here. A tetrameter is a line with 4 beats. An I-am is a short syllable, followed by a long one, dan and the.
And catalectic is the key word. It means incomplete, right? A line that's missing the last syllable.
That's what it means. But here's the thing. His analysis is actually wrong, or at least confused. The line is missing a syllable from the beginning, not the end. It's technically a headless line.
So even as he's trying to impose this rigid classical structure on his own rhythm, he can't quite make it fit. The form is unstable.
It is. The language is slipping through his fingers even as he's trying to define it, which is a perfect little microcosm of the whole chapter.
And it led to this huge debate among scholars because for a long time, the main edition of Ulysses had a typo. It printed a catalectic, which means metrically perfect.
Which is the exact opposite of what the line is. It just goes to show how deep you can go with this stuff and how even the smallest word choice can completely change the meaning.
So to try and pull all these threads together, this whole chapter is Stephen's journey to ground himself, to find some solid basis for reality and for his art while he's just drowning in his own anxieties.
That's a great way to put it. His walk across the beach is an attempt to define the self against this constantly changing protean world.
And he does come to a conclusion, philosophically at least. He settles the big debate. Aristotle beats Berkeley. Empiricism wins. The world is real and solid, world without end.
He finds his prima materia. He accepts the material world as the foundation for his art, with Loss the blacksmith as his creative guide.
But, and this is the huge paradox, he solves the philosophical problem of the universe, but he completely fails to solve the problem of himself.
Exactly. The universe is stable, but he isn't. He's wearing borrowed clothes, thinking borrowed thoughts, making borrowed gestures. He can grasp eternal matter, but he can't grasp his own identity.
He's still Proteus, changing from prince to ghost to lonely young man.
It's the first real deep dive we get into the profound isolation of the artist.
Okay, before we finish up, I think it's worth leaving our listeners with one final thought. Something that takes us out of Stephen's very intense head and reminds us of the broader Dublin culture Joyce was capturing.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Because for all the high philosophy, this is also a very funny book.
And it has this very specific kind of irreverent, secular Irish humor running through it.
We saw a hint of it with Stephen taking the phrase world without end from a prayer and using it for his own philosophical ends. That kind of repurposing of religious language is everywhere.
And it's not just from Stephen, the angry intellectual. You see it in the ordinary Dubliners, too. They're Catholics, but they love a good joke at the church's expense.
Oh, absolutely. There's that fantastic joke in the Hades chapter when they're in the cemetery.
The one about the 2 drunks.
Yes. The caretaker tells the story. These 2 drunks are wandering around the cemetery looking for the grave of their friend, a man named Mulcahy.
And they finally come across this big, fancy grave with a statue on it. A statue of Jesus.
And one of the drunks squints up at this statue of our Savior. And he just shakes his head and says...
He says, "Not a bloody bit like the man," says he. "That's not Mulcahy," says he. "Whoever done it."
It's just perfect. It treats this sacred icon like a bad portrait. And there's often a second punchline where the other drunk says, "That's not Mulcahy, that's our Savior." And the first one snaps back, "Not a bloody bit like him either."
It's this brilliant leveling humor. The statue of Christ is judged on its artistic merit, not its spiritual meaning. And that's the world Stephen is walking through, a world where sacred cows are always fair game.
So as you leave Proteus with all its dense philosophy, just remember that the physical reality Stephen finally accepts, the sand, the tide, the people, is also a reality that is constantly bursting with this kind of wit. The world is solid, but it's also absurd.
It's an invitation to read the book not just for its difficulty, but for the life. The messy, funny, contradictory life that's always bubbling just underneath the surface.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the shape-shifting world of Proteus. The struggle, we promise, is worth it.
We'll see you next time for the next deep dive.